All right, here we go. All right, this is the patch 10.2 rundown. Primary focus this patch is we are trying to buff another stab at buffing a lot of the vertical comps that haven't been succeeding. Also creating a few new vertical comps. And then to top it all off, we're going to bring down a few of the outliers that have been kind of balance problems for a while now. We've been kind of light on some of the nerfs. This is going to be another light nudge on a few champions. So let's dive into it. First off is Assassin. Assassin 3 got nerfed in the era of the Nocturne Blender as one of the attempts to try to bring Nocturne Blender down. And it was a little successful, but at the same time, it probably wasn't the right metric to hit. So a 3 Assassin hasn't really been a viable option as counterplay to a strong backline. For example, we're seeing in the meta right now that like Sivir, Azir, Ashe, Twitch, to some lesser extents, are good backline. And you should be able to opt in to throw 3 Assassin into your comp to try to take them out. Throw in a Kiana, Nocturne, Kha'Zix, and take them out. So 3 Assassin is getting a small buff to compensate and make them more playable. We toyed between 75, 65, so we're going to go light here again to try not to overbuff them. But yeah, so 3 Assassin. 6 Assassin, on the other hand, though, is getting a massive buff. 6 Assassin has basically been mostly a troll build all set. So 6 Assassin now actually does a lot of damage. If you pull off 6 Assassin, they hit hard. 6 Assassin, Kha'Zix, for example, with nothing to buff his AD, crits for like 1,000 now. So it's really good. It's still probably not going to be a top tier build. It's probably not going to be an S tier build. But it can be an option if you want to play it. Especially like if somehow Rangers became meta, 6 Ranger was meta, 6 Assassin would be good counterplay. So at least that should be a more playable option. Okay, Blade Master. Blade Master is a hot topic. Blade Master has been probably the most problematic thing all the way back to the launch set, believe it or not. And the issue for this, it's never been the first Blade Master. So Blade Master 3 in launch set and Blade Master 2 in Rise of the Elements are not a problem. The problem is when you up it to one more. Because what starts to happen is, the way Blade Master works is whenever it procs, you gain 300% attack speed for that many attacks. And so let's say when you're at 4 Blade Master, you get 2 extra attacks at 300% attack speed. Then those attacks can also proc. And so in some instances what happens is you have 2 extra attacks, you swing, then you gain a bunch of extra attacks, now you have 3 extra attacks, then 4, then 5, then 6, and it starts scaling off itself in astronomical terms. So it's very streaky, and when it is streaky, basically everything explodes and dies. So we thought a lot about on how to adjust this, and what we've decided is that Blade Master can still proc itself, but it cannot store extra attacks beyond its maximum. So what that means is that changes nothing about 2 Blade Master. 2 Blade Master is exactly the same. But at 4 Blade Master, when you get 2 extra attacks, you swing, you have 2 extra attacks, then you swing again, you have 1 extra attack, but you proc. On live, you would now have 3 extra attacks buffered up, but instead you'll only have 2. So basically it will make Blade Master less streaky at its highest end. So this should help keep Blade Master in check a bit. However, even with that, it still wasn't really enough. So we also lowered the proc chance by 5%. These two things should bring 4 Blade Master into line. It should be feeling a little bit more fair. It should still be like when it procs, it feels good to get 2 extra attacks. But it shouldn't be a constant string of infinite attacks. So, there you go. Desert. Desert has been kind of a thing where basically 2 Desert is free. So many comps run 2 Desert and ignores half the armor. It's really powerful. And then 4 Desert is barely worth the effort to ever do. Like, why would you ever run 4 Desert? So we're shifting that. So now 2 Desert is a little less strong. Still pretty strong. 40% armor reduction is still pretty good. Just not quite as good. And so Wardens can still be a good option here. But then if you are willing to go 4 desert, you get the full deal. So 4 desert is now even better than Last Whisper. And this will be relevant when we talk about Wardens. But 100% armor reduction, pretty good. And again, we're not worried about this too much because it's still not, like, this is still less powerful than Void, right? Because your spells still don't do true damage. It's just your auto attacks. So, but yeah, 4 Desert, 3 Assassin, that could be totally a thing. I've seen 4 Desert, 6 Berserker if you can pull it off. But yeah, so. And yeah, this isn't Void because they still have Magic Resist. Alright, Inferno. Inferno is getting a very minor adjustment. With the prevalence of Mystic, though, it's fallen off a bit, and it's still a pretty hard comp to pull off. So 3 Inferno, no change. 6 Inferno, very minor buff. So if you hit 6 Inferno, cool, you do a little bit more damage. No big deal. Now, 9 Inferno, though. 9 Inferno has kind of been a meme comp for a while. When you hit 9 Inferno, it's usually not worth what you gave up. So trying to fix that. So 9 Inferno is getting a very large buff. 9 Inferno should hurt. It should burn like hell. So 9 Inferno getting a buff. So, all right, couple more traits. Mage. Mage has been in a weird spot all set, where 6 Mage has basically not been worth the tax of bringing Vlad, Syndra, and LeBlanc along for the ride, or Talia, because they have so many weak units. Usually the only time you played 6 Mage was if you're running a 3-star Vygar comp, or if you hit like 2 Mage caps. And so we're trying to get 6 Mage to be a little bit more playable, and so it's getting the Berserker treatment, where 6 Mage also gets 20 AP for all the mages. So what this means is if you're willing to bring Vlad, Syndra, and Talia along for the ride, all their spells do 20% more damage, and your brand, which is your primary carry, is also doing 20% more damage. So this should be pretty good. Shadow. Okay, so Shadow is 2 form. The first buff, pretty confident in, and this is for any Shadow, 3 or 6. The buff duration will last 1 more second, so this allows them to get that extra damage for just a little bit longer. Should be a solid buff there. Now, as far as the damage buff goes, though, we didn't buff 3 Shadow, but 6 Shadow is getting a large buff because we want 6 Shadow to work. We want you to be willing to consider to run the whole comp with Yi and Vygar without the Lux, because it's worth it for the damage. Now, that being said, with Lux, this maybe becomes too strong. This might become an Exodia comp. If anything changes from this video to live, it would be that, probably. That number is really big. I think I already posted a video yesterday that showed that this is really strong. It's also one of the few 6s that requires a 5 cost and can't spatula, so it should be strong. But yeah, we'll see. Warden. Warden, this is a silly buff. I actually don't think this changes a ton, but 6 Warden specifically is getting basically double the extra armor. So what this does, and we saw this in an earlier game on stream, but basically if you have 6 Warden, your Wardens go from 40 armor to 440 armor, which basically makes their reduction go from like 40% to 85%. You put on a cloth armor, and it jumps up to like 800, 900 armor, which makes them almost like 90% reduction. So if you go 6 Wardens, what you're saying is, I want a beefy front line against physical attacks, you should get it. So you get it, which is great. Now, why am I not worried about this? Because you still have 20 MR, and spells will still blow you up. And Last Whisper exists, 2 Desert exists, 4 Desert exists. But the nice thing here is if you're running 6 Warden, and they're running Last Whisper, what that actually does is put you back to your natural armor. So it's kind of a counter on itself. So now some people might be going, but what about the 4 Mystic 6 Warden comp? And I'm like, okay, cool. Again, Desert still exists, and I'm not sure what you're killing with, but if you pull that off, cool. Like, honestly, if that's a viable comp sometimes, that's okay. So, and then lastly, this is an exciting one. 6 Woodland. 6 Woodland requires Maokai, Ivern, Nico, LeBlanc, and Lux. If you get them all, which is very hard to do since it's one specific Lux, what happens now is all your Woodland champs will clone. So this means you get 5 extra champions. And if somehow you're crazy and you're running 2 Maokais, 2 Iverns, 2 Nikos, 2 LeBlancs, and 1 Lux as your level 9 comp, you will have 18 units. If you pull that off, grats on the YouTube video with 100,000 views. Grats. Realistically, though, we've tested this and we're not too concerned about its power level. But it should be something fun to try. And honestly, part of this game is having fun. You should be able to have fun. So we're okay with that. Alright, that's it for traits. Let's jump to champions. Alright, first off is Leona. Leona came out. She's been tanky. She's been very, very tanky, which is good. That's what she's supposed to do. She's just been a little too tanky. So we're just taking her spell and lowering it a very small amount. She'll still be tanky, but not quite as tanky. So pretty straightforward. Again, we're going very light with nerfs here, but we just want her to be just a little less tanky. So Malzahar. Malzahar is mostly meme status right now. You use him to enable things. We want to try to change that a bit, so we're introducing some HP scaling on his minions. So instead of 250 at every level, it's 250, 300, 400. What this means is, yes, there should be a version out there where if you can get like Shojin Malzahar on an ocean map at level at 3-star, cool, you're filling the board with some 400 HP units. 400 HP still gets pretty wrecked by Berserkers and Nikos and Luxes. It's also, we're not worried about it because if this ever becomes meta, Deathblade exists. And so you'll just use Deathblade. But Malzahar deserves to be a little bit better. And on a personal level, since Malzahar is my favorite, it's always nice to be allowed to buff the champion I love. So, alright, Ezreal. Ezreal has basically been meme status for a while as well, since he has no traits that off his damage. Glacial is just kind of CC, which is fine. And Ranger is sort of counter to what he wants to do, because typically he's more of a spellcaster Ranger than an actual Ranger. So it doesn't really help him cast that much quicker. So he's kind of been meme status, especially when you compare it to Kindred, who itemizes almost exactly the same, except also gets Shadow and Inferno. So oftentimes, why would you run Ezreal? So what we've done is we've made Ezreal a bit more of a reliable Kindred. He gets extra HP, so he can live a little longer compared to a Kindred, and a bunch more spell damage. So at 2-star, this is a almost 12% buff. So if you want to run your Seraph's Death Cap Ezreal, great. It'll be big. Lastly is Karma. Karma, like Leona, has been a very strong champion. Karma, we were excited for Karma pre-launch, and frankly, we still are. Karma's targeting paradigm and placement paradigm has been really good. But what it kind of leads to, and this was intentional, was Karma is a 4th item slot. She goes next to your 3-item Sivir, and your 3-item Sivir gets 70% attack speed, which is amazing. So again, this is good. We're fine with this. It's just been a little too free. It also enables Mystic really well. So we're just bringing that down a little bit. So 1-star Karma goes from 60 to 40. 2-star Karma goes from 70 to 60. And 3-star Karma, if you can pull it off, stays just as strong. So 3-star Karma should be strong. Congratulations. You got your 3-star Karma. Scion. Scion is supposed to be sort of the front line of the Shadow comp. Is also good in Berserker. Also hasn't really done a lot. We wanted to buff his durability, but to be honest, he's already at the peak of what he can be. He has 850 HP, which is massive for a 3-star. He also has as much armor as we can give him. So instead, what we decided to do is let him be more reliable to cast his spell. So he goes from 50 125 to 75 125, which means in a Shadow comp, you'll get some more reliable CC. So that should be good. And yes, chat's already going crazy about Sivir, so let's talk about Sivir. Believe it or not, I don't think this nerf does much to Sivir. I really don't. The odds that Sivir was actually getting 10 bounces in any particular fight were pretty minor. In a typical like level 7 fight, you're hitting the front line, you're probably bouncing around to about 5 units. You might hit the back line also. But realistically, I don't think you were ever getting 10 bounces. So going from 10-10-10 to 5-7-9 will mean she's still going to bounce a lot, she's still going to do a lot of damage. What this also means, though, is that there might actually be some counter options. For example, Yorick and Malzahar as counter options to fill the board so that now Sivir can't get the full reliable bounces might actually be an option. So that's what this is really trying to target. If we really thought she was too powerful, this number would go down to like 444. But this is still going to be pretty good. But again, when we look at the Sivir comp right now, what we're seeing is Sivir bounce nerf, Desert 2 nerf, and Blade Master nerf. So this will definitely bring down her power. Is it going to be enough? We'll see. Is it too much? I don't think so, but we'll see. Veigar. So Veigar is getting a small buff. The problem with Veigar... So Veigar 3 has been buffed. Veigar 3 is really good. Veigar 3 blows things up, has a great time. Shout out to H2211, the Veigar main. But when Veigar hits something that he doesn't execute, it's pretty pitiful. It's pretty pitiful. And that's the thing. He's a single target mage, and he's a 3-cost mage. So, like, this thing should hit hard. So we're just trying to buff that up a bit so that even if it doesn't execute, it's still a hard-hitting spell. So, and then lastly, Olaf. Olaf has been the best champion this set for a variety of things. Olaf has been the best example of explaining the difference in perception of meta from low elo to high elo. Low elo is like Olaf is the most overpowered broken thing in the game. High elo is like he's okay, pretty easy to counter. And so he's avoided nerfs for a long time. And honestly, even when I posted that he's getting nerfs, reactions were kind of all over the place where it's like, no, don't kill Olaf. He's so good. He's counterable. So all we're doing is lowering his attack speed here a little bit. And the idea here is to make him a little bit less of a hush bot. So he won't quite get as many procs off. I still think he's going to be insanely good. I still think double IE Olaf is still bonkers. This is just a very minor nerf. I think if we don't do this nerf, Berserkers will be the dominant comp with all the other nerfs going around. So this is just a preemptive, bring Olaf down just a little bit. So, okay, I think that's it for champs. Yep, all right, so let's go to items. So items this patch, what our goal with the items this patch was literally, I'm going to quote someone I was talking to, one of the Challenger players, who was like, there's too many shit items. And it's like, okay, that's fair. So our goal this patch is to make less shit items. So we're trying to make less shit items. So first off, Bramble Vest gets a buff. Bramble Vest should be a little bit stronger early game and a little bit worth the damage. So that's a big buff. You'll also notice the 3-star number is pretty big here. So if you can get like a 3-star Leona with Bramble, big times. Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster gets more healing. So if you want to go Bloodthirster Olaf or Bloodthirster Kha'Zix, you go right ahead. Again, not really worried about this because Morello's and red buff still exist, but at least you'll get more healing now when it does. Ginsu's. Ginsu's is such a weird one because Ginsu's is such a fun item. It has been probably the most fun item for 2 sets. But at the same time, with the pace of combat right now in Rise of the Elements, it has basically fallen off and is a trap. You should almost never build this item because combat is so fast. So for now, we're going to give it back the 1 extra % attack speed. So it should have some more time to get up to what it should be. But yeah. Hextech Gunblade, same thing as Bloodthirster. With Morello's existing, going to get a buff. And yes, some of you might be noticing that like these items are going back and forth, and we have these levers for a reason. Different sets, they may need different levers based on what's going on. So, Iceborne Gauntlet, we launched, and it launched as very weak. So we're going to give it a buff. So Iceborne Gauntlet. I have seen PvE games where someone goes Iceborne Gauntlet Ezreal and Iceborne Gauntlet Kindred, and you have a very frozen team, and that's okay. So this should be much more worth actually getting the frozen now. Locket of the Iron Solari. Nothing really changes here unless you put it on a 3-star champion. We're trying to make putting the scaling items on a 3-star champion a little more exciting. So again, this is power budget to a 3-star. So if you can get that 3-star Jax I got last game and put Locket of the Iron Solari on it, great. You get some extra shielding. And lastly is Ludens. As you just saw from an earlier game this morning, Ludens on 3-star Cog is really, really good. Maybe too good. We'll see. But again, Ludens gets a buff all around, and on 3-star is really good. All right, next stuff we're going to talk about is probably coming out of nowhere because most people can't get these from like hidden patch notes. Let's talk item changes. So, with the item system, when we did that change all the way back in the launch set, it was perceived really well. Things went very good, but we are trying to look at where we are now and go, okay, how can we make it even better? Looking at some of the cases and some of the things that haven't been working as well as we wanted to. So first off, we think right now there is a bit too much gold in the game and a bit too much variance within that gold. So, for example, right now a small loot box can be either 2 gold, 3 gold, or 4 gold. And I will say, as someone who knows that, when you open a box and you get 2 gold, it feels so bad because you're like, I could have got 4 gold. So what we've done for small loot boxes is we removed the 4 gold option. So now small loot box is always 2 or 3. So again, this removes the variance. So if you got 2 boxes and it had 4 gold, and I got 2 boxes and had 8 gold, not going to be as big. Now, will it feel bad that they're less? Maybe. But again, everyone's getting the same less, so this is fine. And so what that does is the average value is down by about 15%. And again, this is overall because we think there is too much gold in the game anyway, so bringing it down is good. Medium loot boxes, same thing. Right now the choices are 5, 6, or 7 gold. We're removing the 7 gold option. And the 7 gold option in this case was very rare. It was very hard to get 7 gold. So what we're doing is just removing that, and that only brings the average value down by about 3%. So this is a good thing. So, yeah. And then the gold loot boxes didn't need to change. So that's just fine. Next change. So right now the way it works is at the start of the game, you are assigned a number of item components. I'm not going to say what those numbers are, but you will either get between X or Y. X being small, Y being large. And right now that difference was pretty decent, pretty decently sized. You could tell the games where it was like, wow, they had 2 more full items than me. Now keep in mind, if they had more full items, you were getting other things like gold, but there was a big difference there. So what we've done is we've actually removed the lowest case. So if you ever played the game and noticed, wow, there was this game where I only had, and this is an example, 4 full items. That's all I had. Well, now it'll be 4 full items plus 1 component. Because we're just going to raise the floor. So technically this means on average there will be more items in a game. On average. Because again, we're just removing the worst case. So again, this should lead to a more fair world. In addition, those items were spread across multiple rounds. So sometimes you would start with like 1 item and a bunch of gold at the early round, and all of it would come late. So in the first 3 PvE rounds, we've also removed the lowest case. So now everyone should have about a more equal start. It's not completely equal. There will still be some people that got a lot of their gold early versus a lot of their items early. But, again, this is still a more fair situation. So this is a step in, I know, what a lot of people want. And frankly, even I wasn't happy with the variance because, again, the best and worst case were still way too far apart. So this should bring it a little closer together. Next up, full items. Oh, full items. So again, the idea with full items dropping was you were supposed to adapt to items you might not normally use. Because again, This game is about adapting to random situations that happen. But man, did it feel bad if you were on the low end of item variance, and when you got those items, it were things you weren't wanting. Like, you're a deep in Mage comp, and you drop a Giant Slayer, and you're like, cool, thanks, game. So, what we've done is full items drop significantly less for everybody. They still drop, which I know will be controversial, but they do still drop. But, in addition, they will only drop if you're on the high end of the item distribution. So, if you get a full item, what you can know in the back of your mind is, well, I'm already getting more items than everyone else anyway, so that's a good thing. And if you don't get, if you're like on the low end of the item distribution, you will not get full items, so you won't get punished extra. So that should hopefully again make the game fair. And then the last crazy thing is, it was rare, but it was possible to get 2 full item drops in the same game. Again, very rare, but it was possible. Now it's not. If you get a full item drop in a game, that's it. You're only going to get 1. So these should all be more improvements to making the item system still be variant, but more fair overall. So, all right, some small system changes. These are some quality of life things. PvE rounds, the timing on planning phase goes from 30 seconds to 20 seconds. This affects stage 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, and then Krugs, Wolves, Raptors, Dragons, etc. The idea here is that most of the time players don't really use these rounds anyway. They just sit around kind of twiddling their thumbs. So this will actually help game time go down a bit. We do want game time to go down. It's just we want to do it in places that won't ruin the game. This is a good one. So, cool. Honestly, if you've seen me playing PvE games, like, you probably didn't even notice it. So this has been a pretty safe change. This next one, I'm so good. I'm glad we did this one. Force of Nature now appears on Carousel 95% less often. It is drastically reduced. So it was happening way too frequently. It can still happen because, again, we want there to sometimes be variance that's like, whoa, there's a Force of Nature. But right now, instead of it being, whoa, there's a Force of Nature, it's, oh, look, there's the Force of Nature that happens every other game. So that's bad. So change that. Next one, this is another small quality of life change. PvE rounds are now immune to Zephyr. So no more dragons floating for 6 seconds for no reason. Now, the one counter argument I hear is, but Krugs, I was using Zephyr to beat Krugs. Oh, sorry, you lose to Krugs now. Enjoy. And last one, the trait tracker now has chromatic tier to celebrate rare synergies like Inferno 9. So the rule is, if the synergy requires a spatula or lux, it's now prismatic and cool. And what this will allow us to do is have cool things like, if we want to go 2, 4, 6, 8 now, we can go bronze, silver, gold, prismatic. So it's just a new tier that we can use. So already you can see this in game with things like 6 Woodland, 6 Blade Master, 9 Inferno, 9 Light. I think there's a couple others, but yeah. So that'll be cool. One more slide. No, 2 more slides. Sorry. One more balance change slide. These are really, really minor, though, but I wanted to call them out. The only thing these do is buff 3-star versions of champions. So these are barely buffs. But again, we've made that big change to 3 stars. We wanted to push some changes to 3 stars to get some of their power back. So 3-star Renekton gets a little bit of spell power back. So you can do a little bit more damage. 3-star Renekton should be threatening. Cool. 3-star Vlad, same thing. If you get a 3-star Vlad, he should be healing up a lot. So 3-star Vlad gets a small buff. And the last one is Ashe. This one's silly, but wanted to talk about it. 3-star Ashe used to get 250% attack speed when she cast her spell. The problem is, she's a ranger, and she was basically already capped at attack speed. Like, this almost did nothing. It was actually usually not great. So we took that away, put her back to normal attack speed scaling, and instead gave her a much more crazy AD ratio. So if you hit 3-star Ashe, she attacks fast and hits like a truck. Because 3-star Ashe was kind of troll compared to the other 3-star 4 costs. So that's all this is it's an adjustment. 3-star Ashe should now be slightly better. Cool. This does not buff 2-star or 1-star Ashe. Last slide, bug fixes. First off, sorry for patch 10.1 where the tooltips were all out of date. They're all fixed. So all the tooltips will be accurate. Hooray! Happy days. Next one, real small, but electric finally says what type of damage it does. So it's actually magic damage in case you didn't know. So yes, you can build Mystic against electric, but it actually says it. Karma is no longer 7'6" or 228 centimeters tall. For whatever reason, when we put the Karma in, we didn't get the scaling in time. So Karma was giant and massive. Karma is no longer giant and massive. She is now the appropriate size. A long-requested buff. Kindred finally works with Jeweled Gauntlet. I felt so bad that this bug's been around for so long. But Kindred's spell can now properly crit with Jeweled Gauntlet. This is really good because if you want to go Inferno, Jeweled Gauntlet, i.e. Kindred now, it's actually a legitimately good build. Honestly, it will probably be a very powerful build next patch. So if anything affects balance, bug fix-wise, it'll be that one. So that's a bug fix, hooray. And lastly, Zeeks. When we were doing the item reworks, one of the things we were toying with was moving Zeeks into the attack speed. Because that makes sense, it gives your team attack speed. We ended up not shipping it, so we put the item back. But when we did that, we didn't set its stats right. So what's been happening on live right now is if you have a Zeeks on someone, it's actually giving them 15% attack speed instead of 15 AD from the sword. Really minor thing. Most people didn't notice. A few players did, though. Thank you to those who did. That's now fixed. It now gives 15 AD instead of 15 AS. All right. So that's it for the patch 10.2 rundown. This goes live on Thursday. I think it's January 23rd. It's Thursday this week because of the holiday. But yeah, so look forward to that. Hopefully we see some fun meta shifts. I look forward to the first video of the Woodland 6 that actually wins the game. So yeah, should be fun. And yeah, it's the day before the Runeterra beta, so yeah, definitely try out Legends of Runeterra. So yeah. Alright, thanks for tuning in. That's it for patch 10.2 rundown. Take it easy.